Let's go, girls. Welcome to Talk Wealthy to Me. I'm Michelle Taylor, founder of Women in Wealth. From breaking money myths to building wealth and achieving financial freedom, we're here to empower you to create your own path. Talk Wealthy. Now, join the conversation and let's change the way women think and feel about money. Okay, ready? Before we begin and go into all of the things that this podcast will do for you, I think it'll be really helpful to explain a little bit about my journey and how we got here. So growing up, I had two amazing parents who were divorced and couldn't have felt or treated money differently than they did. My mom was a very responsible, working mom that had to budget every penny. And I grew up watching her sit at our kitchen table every Sunday and balance her checkbook. Never paid any mind to it, never thought about how she was affording to put me into dance classes and to allow me to do the things that my friends were doing. And it was coming at her obsessive detail when it came to budgeting our family's finances. My dad, on the other hand, was an entrepreneur. And he did not find success right away. He had a ton of work ethic and grit, which is why he has success now. But in the beginning, he started with just himself in a truck. And because he was a Disney dad, I would only see the best side of spending and what that looked like. He would come and pick me up for the weekends, and we would go to the mall and go to Disney World or go to the fair, and it was all the fun. So I associated discipline around money with the antithesis of fun and what my dad was doing as the goal in life. And to me, entrepreneurship was what was going to provide that. What I didn't understand is that wasn't what every day looked like for my dad or for anybody that knows how to manage their money in the best way possible. So growing up, seeing these two examples, again, neither parent really taught me very much about money. It was more about entrepreneurship and the things that they felt would bring success. My mom always telling me, don't ever look for somebody else to give you the keys to the kingdom. You go out and accomplish what you want to accomplish without depending on somebody else. And I took that with me, and I feel like I live by that rule today. My dad always told me to pay attention to the details and to value relationships and pour into people. And I learned from an early age that he could sell ice to an Eskimo. And it was because of his relatability and his commitment to being an active listener and really making people feel heard and seen. So I took that with me and realized that with those two things, I could really accomplish anything I put my mind to. So not in the traditional sense of teaching about finances, but I feel like those two things really did help me. What didn't help me is when life started to throw some adversity my way. So at 17 years old, I was diagnosed with leukemia out of the blue. I had never had a cavity, and I was a cheerleader all through school and came home and realized that something was wrong and I wasn't feeling well. So after going through several weeks of trying to figure out what was happening, we got the diagnosis, and a little bit of me wanted to buck the system. I felt like someone was telling me who I was, and it wasn't how I identified. So I took that kind of refusal and decided to fight through it and not accept that reality. Before that diagnosis, I had had my first really big breakup that every teenager goes through. And again, felt like it was so counterproductive to the life that I had envisioned for myself. So it was one thing after another. I had a falling out with some of my best friends in college and didn't go to the college that I had always planned on going to right away. So all of these things were happening, and I just felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. So in an effort to feel really fulfilled again or find happiness in this time of total chaos, I leaned into shopping. And I think a lot of people do that. I'm thankful that I leaned into something that didn't have long-term health effects, but it certainly did have long-term financial effects. I grew up with family members that were very successful and had a lot of success as entrepreneurs. And my two cousins were like my sisters and still are to this day, but they grew up very differently than I did. So when we would go back to school shopping, we were counting every penny. When I went back to school shopping with my aunt, we were going to Neiman Marcus. And so from the outside looking in, I would see what their experience was. And again, that entrepreneurship was how they were afforded that life, and just saw the shiny object and thought, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to go after. What it also did, though, is it made me think that money was going to be the key to fixing things. And I know that all of you know that that simply isn't the case. Money makes things easier, but it doesn't make you happy. So when I was going through this identity crisis, I would go shopping with my cousins and spend money that I did not have. Confessions of a Shopaholic is my life story. I should be collecting royalties from it, but I really do identify with what that did for her. So I will never forget going shopping with my cousin and trying to buy a pair of Marc Jacobs shoes that I still have to this day, and walking into Saks Fifth Avenue with a credit card and saying, oh, I hope I can buy these because my credit card is at its limit. And the sales associate there, of course, meant not any ill intent, but I can tell you it was the catalyst to what happened next. He said, as long as you're paying your bills on time, you really don't have a credit limit. So my eyes lit up. I bought the shoes. And then my cousin Christina and I quickly ran over to Louis Vuitton. And I bought a handbag that I could not afford and had no idea what I was doing. But I looked at my cousin and I said, this must be what it feels like when people do drugs, because I feel high. And I can picture exactly where I was at the moment that I said it and what her reaction was. And my heart breaks for that girl, because now as an adult, I know why I was doing it. But I'll never forget walking out of that store and realizing back then, Louis Vuitton, there were no returns. And here I had a $4,000 handbag, and that was in 2007, with no job and no way to pay that bill. And I cried. And you would think that that stopped me, but it was the constant search for filling a void that I felt all of these other things had left in my life. So it continued. I opened up credit cards in college because of a free t-shirt and because it felt like free money. It was something that I could do and have an immediate instant gratification and have something to show for it. And walking into those stores just made me feel good and seen and important. And it became a real problem. So finally, my parents, realizing what had happened, after a few months and thinking that I would correct the behavior and never did, said, listen, you've got to get on top of this, or you're going to have to go talk to someone about why you're shopping the way you are. And I think it was then that I realized, okay, I'm going to take the grit of what my dad taught me, paying attention to the details and, never giving up on something that you have set as a goal, and realizing I was not going to let this be bigger than me. So I sold all of the things I had bought over the several months that I went on this escapade on eBay, and was selling it for pennies on the dollar. And once the bills were paid off, still having that debt to work through was a really hard lesson to learn. But I think that's part of the reason why we're here today, is understanding your relationship with money from the very beginning and understanding what making the right choices can actually do. So I think I mentioned a few minutes ago, there weren't any lasting health effects, but financial effects are huge. It took me years to get my credit to where it should be. And I think what that, 25-year-old girl then didn't understand is those impacts are so far reaching. I always paid a higher interest rate or couldn't get approved for an apartment I was trying to rent. And that is what I'm so passionate about, is trying to get people to think about money a little bit differently, to define what success looks like for all of us. It's not going to be the same, and that's okay. I think that once we determine what that success looks like, having the right tools and access to information and education to go out and create the dream is all that any of us want. So, with all of that being said, I think that my goal here and why Women in Wealth and Talk Wealthy to me is to truly change the way women think and feel about money is not difficult. It just takes accountability and access to the information, understanding decisions that are made and the lasting implications of those decisions, and at least taking pause to understand how to do things differently. So my hope is that through this work, women are able to be a little bit reflective and understand their areas of opportunity or weakness and find the right people or the right information to change their trajectory and how they interact with money. In this day and age where we have access to what everybody is doing, what they're spending their money on, how they are defining success, I think it's really important for us to realize what's meaningful and motivational to us and not what is going to check a box. So I think back so often and ask myself, what does success look like for me? And I remember being young, 9 or 10 years old, and thinking, when I can have fresh flowers in my house every single day, I will know I have made it. And my parents, going back to my mom, we had the bare minimums at the house, middle class family, no extras, and extras meant the fun stuff, the fun snacks or drinks. And I remember going to friends' houses, and when they had a garage refrigerator stocked full of extras or fun Cokes and drinks, I always thought that their parents were loaded. And I think that those things sometimes get overlooked when you're thinking about what success looks. And the little girl in all of us, those little wins are so easy. So yes, all of the time, I have fresh flowers in my house, and we do have a stocked garage refrigerator. And it might be commonplace now, but it just does something for me and for the story and creating what this big vision would look like that feel like wins. And so I think when we can really dial in to the reasons, the whys that are a little bit smaller and tucked away, that may not be the big things that you think about, like your kids or the impact that you have, but the little things, turning left when you get on an airplane instead of right. When I was growing up, flying first class would have never even been a consideration. And those are things that if you plan out and think through now, as adults, we can make any of those things happen. So I would love to hear from any of you guys in the future what those things are. What mattered to you when you were little? When was the first time that you saw somebody that you would define as successful, and who were they? Why were they successful? How did you emulate them? What did you go after? I remember thinking with who I was going to marry, thinking, well, my uncle was a business owner, but in a much different way. He was a white collar business owner and very traditional and all the things that you would think of that come with that. And then my dad was an entrepreneur who came home. He had a window and door company and was dirty every day and tired. And I remember thinking, why would anybody choose that when you can choose this? And man, it's so funny how things change, because I now realize in the world that I get to peek into with clients that being an entrepreneur can look like anything. And as long as it's pursuing what you're passionate about, none of the other things that come with it matter. But when I was younger, the hard work didn't seem as desirable. And now I realize that the journey to get there is so much more fulfilling than just stumbling into something, because you get to come home clean and without sacrifice. So as we wrap up this first official episode of Talk Wealthy to Me, I would encourage all of you to come along on this journey and learn something, learn from each other. Whether you are somebody who looks more like the girl that was in terrible credit card debt and over her head, or you're the girl that's a successful entrepreneur and has already defined what success looks like and is now reaping the rewards of that. I think there's something for all of us to learn here. And let's define what success looks like around money and choices for all women. And I'm excited to have you be a part of the story.